Grab a cup of joe, buckle up, and let's embark on a journey of self-discovery, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Let's get rolling.
Hey everyone, I hope you are already enjoying season 2. If you didn't check out my guest from last week from episode 50 with Rachel, please make sure you do. Her story is wonderful. It's amazing. I'm super excited to see where she is going with her company Unmarked Street and the Business of Apparel podcast. There's so many cool things happening over there, and she's helping so many amazing folks in the performance apparel space. And she's got things like sustainability and manufacturing and all these courses that just talk about how to win in the performance apparel space. So, not a shameless plug. I'm proud to say, like, if you didn't check out the episode, go back and check it out. And if you have, thank you. And make sure you reach out to Rachel and let her know. And if you're interested in a fashion or apparel space at all, she is the person you need to talk to, because it's not just her. It's an entire team of amazing folks that have been doing this work for a very long time. All right. So today's going to be like a special episode for my musician friends or those that are in the performing arts. At least that's who I think this is for, but who knows? You might discover something inside of here that is for you as well, and you've never played an instrument in your life. But I run into this a lot. And over the last 2 decades of being a freelance drummer and performing and teaching and all of those pieces and all these different spaces and venues, whether in theaters or out in bars or in big festivals or even in small town little street dances, wherever the venue is, it doesn't matter. Or if I'm teaching, I've always had this idea. It's not even an idea, just kind of a mantra about how I approach when I'm showing up to perform or practice or play with a group. And here I am saying the one thing that I'm telling you not to do. And that is, if you're going to a performance space, and in this case, I'm going to talk about a rehearsal. And let's define what a rehearsal is. A rehearsal is when a group of people get together to rehearse a thing so that they can go perform it or do it in front of other people. In my case, many times it's like, we're going to go rehearse an entire set of music, which is about an hour to 75 minutes. And so that we are all on the same page and we know what's going on and everybody knows all the direction and we know the form and the arrangements and how we're going to go in and out. So we have all this transitions. Okay, am I boring any of you yet? Okay, cool. So we get through all those transitions and what are the performance factors we're going to put into the show, and then we rehearse it front to back. Well, that's always the intent. And then you always have those 1 or 2 folks that show up to your rehearsal and they think it's a practice. And what is the difference? You're like, what's the difference between a rehearsal and a practice? Are they not the same thing? And I am going to give you a resounding no. They are not the same thing. When I was teaching high school kids and we were working on drumline or marching band, or I was giving private lessons, those kinds of things, I say you practice at home and you rehearse as a group. You practice at home and you rehearse as a group. And what that really means is the practice piece that you're doing, that's all in the drumming world, a lot of times we'll call it wood shedding, right? Because a lot of times you're shedding wood with the drumsticks and there's stuff flying all over the place, right? But you're doing all the technical things, you're learning all the specifics, you're memorizing forms, you're learning notes, you're learning licks, you're learning how does this need to look, sound, feel, all of those kinds of things. You're doing all that work at home, in your practice space, in your studio, all of that. So that when you go to rehearse, all you're doing is plugging in all the other parts and making sure that you're all headed in the same direction at the same time. Now, in that rehearsal, somebody might be like, hey, I listened to the studio version and I listened to the live version. Well, it's still the same song, but they're going to have a little different look and feel. And ultimately, since you're doing a live performance of this, a lot of times it's going to be some hybrid of the two of them. And so that's the part you're figuring out. And that's the rehearsal part. And you're figuring out, okay, we've done our practicing on our own. We can all play our parts. We all know what we're supposed to do. We all know what our things and our homework was, and we come prepared. And then when we do the rehearsal, it's just figuring out those nitty gritty things if they even need to be figured out. And then we can just perform in rehearsal, and you do it a couple times, and then it's like breathing. And then when you get on stage, it's like nobody's none the wiser. And why is this so important? Well, as I got later in my career as a performer and drummer, what I started to do is I stopped rehearsing. And if someone would call me to hire me for a gig and they asked me for a rehearsal, if it was in the genre of music that I've spent now over a decade performing in at a professional level all over the country, they called me to do those. I say, no, just send me a set list. I'll learn your songs. And what that meant is I went deep into the practice room and made sure I showed up to those shows and those performances so that when I plugged myself into what they were doing, it just happened naturally and felt good and felt right. One of my favorite compliments from a band when I play with them, especially for the first time, is wow, I didn't even A, know you're back there, and B, know that it wasn't really someone who had been playing with us for the first time. And sometimes I get, wow, that felt like nothing like what the other drummer did. And I'm like, so is that good or is that bad? They said, well, we don't know. It felt really good. It just was different, but different good. I said, okay. And my goal is always to just get rehired. And many times that happens. And not all the time does it happen because sometimes it's just not a good fit. And sometimes not a good fit means it's not a good fit for the people. Sometimes it's not a good fit for like me musically. I'm to a point now where like I've narrowed the genres of music that I play in because my time is a little more limited and I'm not playing as many gigs and shows. And so within that, I make sure that I protect my creative space as much as I do how often I'm doing it. And so I just really pick the genres of music and with the people that I want to and kind of where I want to, because they're calling me to ask me. And because currently I'm not playing with a band specifically or touring with anyone exclusively, that gives me some flexibility to do that. And I have some really amazing things that are happening in my life that also afford me the opportunity to approach it that way versus 15 years ago when I was full-time musician and I was playing 125 to 145 shows a year. I took every gig I could and as many as I could. And if I could double up on a day, I would. All of those pieces. But it's all of those opportunities that I took that led me to the ability to say something like, hey, I'm just going to show up and we're going to just go play the gig. But I want to go back to the part where we did practice and then we did rehearse because you always knew if some person would show up to a rehearsal and think that they just needed to practice and learn all their parts there. And that's just really annoying because that's a waste of time. Because in many cases, you've gotten three, four, five, six other people together who are all investing their time and maybe all did their homework. And you're sitting there waiting while they literally listen to a recording and try to figure out what they're supposed to be doing. And so I found the less opportunities I had to do that, which was grateful and way less of a headache. I also found that I was playing with better and different people, and it led me to other spaces that gave me other opportunities that when I went to a rehearsal, it wasn't really that stressful. Honestly, it was more fun. And that's what it should be. A rehearsal should be fun and enjoyable. And the headaches might just be like, oh, yeah. Oh, yep. You're right. That's how that goes. Let's just do it again. And now we got it. Right. But it should be more like just hanging out. Like, let's hang out. Let's figure this out together. It's almost like hanging around a campfire, talking and having conversations with folks. You just happen to have instruments with you and you're creating music and then you have this experience. And then when you go to perform it live, it's almost like people have no idea that you spent the amount of time you did. But unless you spend that practice time at home and woodshed those things and learn those things, and even before that, you practiced and learn the craft of your instrument or learn whatever your craft is so that you get good enough so that when someone asks you to practice songs, you know how to do that. And you don't have to fight against your body or fight against your technical skills or any of those pieces to even learn it, to be able to show up and be prepared at a rehearsal. I was really felt fortunate for myself about 5, 6, not even 5, like 3 years ago. I got to a point in my drumming, based on the fact that I had practiced so much and had so many rehearsals and also so many live gigs under my belt, and still spent the time practicing in between and growing my skills and gaining new technical facility. It gave me the opportunity then to get to the point where I could just envision what I wanted to play and I could execute that, versus having to sit down and actually figure out all of the body mechanics and all the things that needed to happen at the same time to be able to facilitate those things. I want to do this and I could execute it, which, as you can imagine, makes that practice session that much easier because you're not hindered by anything other than understanding and knowing what the song needed to be. And then once you know that, then you show up to the rehearsal. Think of how much easier that is, because now you just have the opportunity to show up and hang out with some folks. And then that makes the gig or the performance really, really easy. But unless you put in that time and have that ability and were dedicated to your craft up front, it makes the practicing way more difficult, which ultimately is not going to set you or the group that you're playing with up for any sort of success. And then ultimately the performance just is not going to go as well. And that's what you want to have happen. It needs to feel like you're breathing. It needs to feel like you're up there having a conversation. And those are my favorite compliments. I can tell you, in all of the years of playing live gigs hundreds of times, thousands of hours, nobody has ever come up to me and said, "Man, Jeremy, I really love that drum solo." No one has said that ever. But I love the way that felt. The energy you provide brings something that we haven't felt or heard before. Those are the compliments that I love giving, or getting and giving, actually. And you make my job easy. I don't have to think about you. Time just exists when you're there. You make it feel good. All of those things are things that I put into my practice so that I made sure that that's how I executed when I was in a rehearsal or when I went to a live gig. So this is why I say practice is not rehearsal. If you want to find out more, if you want to have a conversation about maybe how you can move from the thinking about so deep in the practice and getting into the rehearsal so that you can definitely get to the performance piece, hit me up, send me a DM, send me an email. You can find me on social media over the place. Hit me up. I'd love to have a conversation and figure out how I could maybe help you out with that. Again, remember, practice is not rehearsal. And as you're going down this road of life, and wherever your road is headed, you're always practicing and honing those skills and showing up for yourself. So practice now so you can rehearse, so that performance, you're ready for that opportunity. And I'll see you down the road.
Thanks for cruising with me on this episode of Rhythm of the Road. Remember, the journey itself is the destination. Until next time, keep the rhythm flowing, and we'll see you down the road.